Hello, I'm Bob Fisher, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the annual Sun Youth Forum panel discussion. Joining me are 6 of the brightest high school students in Southern Nevada. I will introduce them in a moment, but first, let me give you a little background on the Sun Youth Forum. Las Vegas Sun founder Hank Greenspun and journalist Ruthie Deskin truly believe that young people have something important to say and that they needed to be heard. Their idea was to provide a forum where students could come together and exchange ideas on a variety of issues. Since 1956, Southern Nevada high school students have been doing just that. Students are assigned to a group where they will discuss topics ranging from immigration to gun control. And interestingly enough, on this program, we're going to discuss immigration and gun control. So here's a short video of this year's event.
Chance for the students to speak out, to say what they honestly think. There aren't a lot of forums for young people today, and so we're pleased to have this forum that's gone on for years and years. And in my opinion, the students are getting better every year. The most prominent part of the forum is the student's opinion. The moderators are there to guide, but they're not there to give their opinion. They're there simply to guide the conversation. When you sit in these classrooms, you realize what is right about education, how bright these students are. They come from all levels in our school district. They all have a very active opinion. They all seem to care deeply, and I'm surprised at how much they care for each other, and the great courtesy they show each other. We're in good hands with this group. I'm convinced that the chance for our nation to survive is in the young. I think that the good old boys have had their turn. I think the young people need to take control at this point. Looks like they're going to, and I think it's going to be a far better country. I think we're going to be better represented. I believe they'll be more logical. We have a series of questions we ask the students. We have students from different schools, different backgrounds who address that question. And so we're able to talk in real detail about topics that sometimes you can't do in the classroom. And so it's different in that way. The Sun Forum, as you probably know, is unique. We're the only forum like this in the country. We have a number of entities that come forth to give scholarships. The Sun gives some, and you can see Barrett Dole gave some. Shelley Berkeley's still giving a scholarship. And we have a number of banks that have contributed scholarships. I think that shows that we believe in higher education. We want to help provide students to have that opportunity, and we're pleased what we can do to help them. We think we want to push them ahead. We don't want students to be reluctant to lead anymore. We want students to get out front. We had voter registration here for the first time because we believe we want more students voting because we believe they'll be better informed on the issues than our people in my generation.
It's been an extremely positive experience. I got to meet a lot of new people with a lot of different perspectives about the world, and it was great to really hear their perspectives about the world and to converse about our differences about different topics. The 2 most controversial topics in my room was gender equality being spread throughout the world and climate change, and also actually the Space Force. We got to experience different perspectives from people throughout the district, so they've had their own different experiences, whereas within a classroom, it's more homogeneous because there are people that have had pretty similar experiences because they live in a similar area. In my classroom specifically, we all come from the suburbs, we all have pretty good lives, and we may have different experiences, but when you have an entire district of people accumulating in one specific location, then you get so many different views, and also you get so many different people that have more knowledge on specific topics. There were so many people that knew so much about things that I had very little knowledge about, and when you get to realize that, you want to do more research, you want to learn more, and that's I think a really good push. So I think after the Sun Youth Forum, I will probably do a lot more research about these questions and take it into my own hands to become a better member of society by learning more about things that I necessarily don't know too much about.
Wow, I want to tell you, it was a wonderful event. It was really great this year. Finalists, by the way, from each of the groups are selected to represent that group. And the interesting thing that happens is that each group has different topics, and represented here are going to be 6 finalists chosen by their groups. and we are going to talk about a variety of different subjects. I want to introduce the panel, and Amal, I want to begin with you, but was that you? Was that you in the package?
Yeah.
So introduce yourself.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Amal. I'm a senior at Green Valley High School. And in the fall, hopefully, I will be attending a university and majoring in biochemistry and English.
Great. Ethan, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ethan. I go to Rancho High School. I'm a senior there. And in the fall, I hope to be studying chemical engineering.
Wow. Claire?
Hi, I'm Claire, and I'm a senior at Coronado High School. I'm not sure which university I will be attending, but I do know I want to pursue a career in law and politics.
Wow. Wow. Lexi?
Hello everyone, I'm Lexi. I'm a senior at Spring Valley High School, and in the fall, I'm thinking about going to the University of Reno to major in business marketing and business management.
Thank you very, very much. Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a senior at Liberty High School. In the fall, I hope to attend UNR for a communications degree.
And last but not least, Isabella.
Hi, my name's Isabel. In the fall, I hope to attend Utah State University to study to become a therapist working with children with special needs and their families. I currently go to Desert Oasis High School, and I'm a senior.
Is everybody ready?
Yes.
Everybody ready?
Yes.
All right. So what's going to happen, introduce what your topic was, and then it's up to you. So Amal, let's start with you.
All right. So at the Sun Youth Forum, I was around the world, and in around the world, we had a lot of topics, but we, in our group, in our room, we specifically talked about 8 different topics, right? And that for the first topic being how to get young people encouraged to vote. Another one was about the Space Force. Another one was about Russia. Another one was about China. But one topic in particular that really resonated with me was about gender equality and about how the United States can play a role in spreading gender equality throughout the world.
Reaction?
Is this as far as like spreading voting rights or just basic like workplace rights?
I think it just encompasses equality as a whole and just setting men and women on equal standards.
Do you think that the United States is a model country to other countries in regards to gender equality?
I definitely think that the United States has made a lot of strides in this topic and in gender equality, but I still don't think that there's anywhere in the world that really has that true equality with men and women. I think that in the United States, there is a lot of examples of where they are unequal, and I think that as we progress as a society and as we progress as people, I think that people become more aware of these issues, and women are fighting harder to improve and to be more equal and to demand what they want. I think it's really important, and I think that we're on our path to getting there, but I don't think that we're there yet.
I think it's quite odd because here in the United States, I believe that socially we're very aware of what gender equality is and what it looks like. However, what's polarizing is how our government doesn't necessarily take gender equality as a legitimate issue. And when it comes to certain people that are in office as of now, it seems as if that's the last thing that's on their list, which is pretty fair given that we have to consider like healthcare and, as Robin stated earlier, how we have to go about gun control. But I found that it was really cool that this year we actually got one of our first trans members into office on the East Coast. I think it was in West Virginia. I don't necessarily remember, but that's huge.
Right. So it's not only us advocating for our rights in America through government and electing individuals who represent us and, you know, an array of people, but it's also acknowledging, you know, with the question I asked, that we are a model country and that people do look to the United States to kind of to modernize their country in a sense. Now there is some debate if that is a good thing or a bad thing, but I think that when we're talking about gender equality, it's definitely a positive attribute.
Did your group have any suggestions as to different ways? Because I know you guys talked about that for a long time.
Right. It wasn't necessarily, I think one of the biggest suggestions that we had within our group was education and increase of birth control access to across the world. But I think that with education, it was specific to educating women across the world as to what westernized feminism is, and also what feminism movements across the world are to the United States citizens, because I feel like a lot of the time people are not educated as to how other women are facing how they what they believe equality is in their country and what they believe it is to them. So I feel like education was the most focal a common agreement as to how we can solve towards increasing gender equality throughout the world, but also giving access to women to use birth control and to have rights over their own body and to be in control of their own domain was a huge topic of our concern, because a lot of women across the world do not have that. And that's something that a lot of women, a lot of women here do have that access. Maybe not to the greatest extent that we wanted to, but we do have that access, and we do have the power and the voice to get people to at least understand and educate them about those things.
I think to add on to your point about education, we've made a lot of strides in women in STEM fields, and for women a great way to get into a leadership role is through those STEM fields. So I think we've seen a lot more female leaders recently, and I think that will definitely help in the global perspective of how we view women compared to men.
What comes to my mind is that we talk about, the question is bringing equality to women globally, right?
Right.
There are cultural barriers that prevent a lot of that. So is there a way, that would be the most apparent obstacle to me, is that a lot of times that countries we go into are not open because that cultural value doesn't match ours. And it's not necessarily that one is better than the other, it's just that they're different. So how do we combat that aspect of it? Because to bring that equality, we would have to first break down those barriers that prevents that equality.
Right, and I think that goes back to understanding what their culture is, and educating ourselves and them about what our differences are. And then from those differences, I think we can find common ground, that equality is a beautiful thing, and that's something that every single person deserves. And that equality may not be the same thing as to what we perceive as equality versus they, but it's something that we should all have the discussion about, have the debate about, talk about, understand more about.
On that topic, I also think that, as you were saying, in other countries, they just have different cultural differences. And so I think that there's a way to stand up for yourself as a woman, or to advocate for women in whatever society you're in. So in our society in America, it may be different because we have this westernized feminism, and because we have a different insight of what we think equality is, versus in that society, women have their own roles in a lot of societies, and they see women as important, but in a different way. And so I think that just finding ways to advocate for themselves that do apply to their standards and what they believe is correct as far as gender goes, I think that you can advocate for yourself as a woman, and that gender equality can become apparent, but it might just be in a different way than we see it.
Amal, what was the best thing about your group?
About my group?
Yep.
I think that we were all very passionate, and that we all had some type of understanding of a different background coming into this group. So when we came in with all our different ideas and all our different backgrounds, we all gave fresh perspectives about the same topic that
Excellent.
we're discussing.
Ethan, you're on.
My topic was home in Nevada, and we focused a lot on education and high schoolers. And the main topic we discussed was how we feel in school, how safe we feel in school. And we didn't talk a lot about gun control necessarily. You would have thought we would have talked about that. But we talked more about mental health and students trusting their administration, their teachers, and how students and parents can get involved in their role in education.
So my topic was school days, so we also talked a lot about education and how students feel in schools. And one of the big issues that we talked about was having specialists on campuses. So we have guidance counselors on our schools, but a lot of times when students go to those counselors, the counselors seem too busy or the students feel like a burden. And so just finding the resources necessary to combat those issues and to have specialists on school would be really beneficial.
Our group discussed a lot about how counselors are usually there to fill the academic role, to make sure that everyone is graduating, and then deans and administrators are there to make sure that everyone's behavior is good. So at a school without like a mental health person to go to, it's hard for some students to do well in their education when they have other issues that they have to deal with first.
Do you think there should be a mental health person in every school?
I think that there definitely should be a mental health person at every school because some students aren't afforded the opportunity at home or in their classrooms to that kind of person. And if a student can't focus on their education because of other pressing issues, then their education is almost being wasted out on.
I wholeheartedly agree. In my family, we say it takes a village, and that means not one person can have all the answers. So I wholeheartedly agree, and instead of just having one, I think we should have multiple, because at my school there's over 2,000 students. There's no way one person, no matter how good they are, can keep up with that influx of teenager emotions, and just general life is really hard, especially nowadays. So I think it should be more than one person, that way we can tackle all sides of a student's issue. We have our counselors for our academics, we have our deans, if there's a behavioral issue, and then we have a mental health specialist, which I feel if we addressed some students' mental health crisis or just help them through difficult times, their academics and their behavior wouldn't suffer.
I happen to disagree with that idea. Not in the sense
But
where...
you're doing it so politely.
Not in the sense where I don't believe that mental health isn't a problem. I absolutely do think that that's an issue. At my school in itself, we recently just got the IB program, which I think stands for the I don't know how to say the actual word that IB stands for. But it's basically a higher than AP program that kids can go into. And so you have kids that are coming straight from middle school, like 13 to 14, that are going and having lots amount of academic pressure on them. And unfortunately, we've had 2 girls at my school actually take their lives because of that. But I don't necessarily think that it's practical for the United States as of now to even employ these mental health people that you're talking about, given about how much debt that we are in when it comes to school funding. Within CCSD within itself, I think it was actually the Las Vegas Sun that reported that we're $25 million in debt. And so you have schools like Desert Oasis that can't get new desks. You have schools like Durango that can't get new computers in their libraries. And I think what it's more so about, it's about building that community within a school and establishing that this isn't just an institution where you come to learn, but more so that everyone is striving for the same common destiny of higher education and valuing what it means to learn. And that's kind of misconstrued sometimes, because at my school, for example, I feel that there's a harsh divide between what the faculty is and what the students are, and both of those cultures are inherently different. And so to build that trust that gets away from having a little bit of too much involvement within students' lives is something that I feel like isn't being attempted at as of current, at least in our district. But I definitely feel like that's a way to address that issue within the monetary bounds that we have.
You said something that I'm just curious. How many of you have had suicide in your school? Wow.
I wanted to say something. So you were talking about the pragmatism and the reality about implementing these mental health programs. And you mentioned the computers that we don't have and the desks that we don't have. But something that I really want to emphasize is those computers and those desks don't matter if we don't have healthy-minded kids sitting on those desks and using those computers. Absolutely. And we really need to have the right investment.
Well, right. I mean, an alternative to investing into like mental health expertise in the school. Well, if the school district itself gave access to mental health professionals that have free services, like at our school specifically, if you're reported in for any suicidal thoughts or behaviors, then you can go into the counselor's office and they have stacks of pamphlets to give you to services that are completely free, and that you can go to them. It's an off-school campus, and then I think that if they increase access to that and increase the conversation in itself to that, then I think that would be beneficial for all of us for mental health sakes.
Ethan, what's the best thing about your group as you look back?
I think the interesting thing, the best thing, was that I heard a lot of other groups got fiery, like the debates, and our group was almost mellow. We talked a lot about education and having high schoolers around the room, even though we do come from different backgrounds. It was kind of that same mindset of we should be putting more into education. One thing to note, though, that was interesting is that we had a side tangent about how we can deal with homeless youth and how we can get them to do better in their education. And there was a little divide between how the local and state governments would be funding for those students to give them a home or at least a place to stay. And that was kind of like a divide in our group.
Wow, homeless. Thank you. Claire, you're on.
So my topic was teen topics, meaning what are the problems that we as teenagers are experiencing, right? And unfortunately, the main thing that we discussed was stress, pressure, and expectations, which inevitably lead to mental illness. And the main thing that I got from this discussion was we can put on a smile on our face and we can, get through the day, but it doesn't mean that the student next to you isn't struggling, and that's something that I really learned. Because I was looking at my peers and I was like, everybody looks amazing, everybody's presenting well, but really they have struggles, that they're going through. And the main thing we questioned was, do we have adequate mental health services? And if so, what's happening to our youth?
Something that we discussed in our group, actually, also relevant to what you were talking about, was not only just having specialists on campus and just having the people there to do it, but just having support given to those students. A lot of times, students don't come from families that have a strong support system. So I feel like you were talking about how your parents have a saying that it takes a village. So I feel like that, some students come from a home that has a strong support system, but there are a lot that don't have parents that are super involved in their lives, or that don't see mental health as a real thing. And so just having school be a safe place and having a support system at school is something that's important and that can benefit students.
To that I ask, though I definitely agree that we need to have these strong support systems, but is that enough? And that's kind of the moment we had in the room. I didn't want to say that we felt helpless, but we just couldn't think of pragmatic solutions. Because we can say, let's implement psychiatrists and psychologists into schools. Let's sit down, talk to the students, enforce supportive environments. But I feel like that's already been emphasized. So what now?
I think in the fact that it's been emphasized doesn't necessarily guarantee that this issue is humanized, if that makes sense. We talk about these things, but when we look at people, do we see that struggle, and do we feel that, Earlier, Amal had talked about how if you go to your counselor, they'll have pamphlets and pamphlets. I don't know if your guys' schools have this, but there's this new program called Safe Voice, where you can report students who have very clear mental health signs. But it's within pamphlets and programs that are automated that don't make the feeling of what that's like humanized. And it's about building that community and understanding that although school is getting harder, much harder than what I'm assuming school was for you, right? It's so much harder, but we have to embrace that, and the struggle should be universal. And I feel like that's why, although it's weird, a lot of memes come up about what it's like to be a student. You're in high school when, but at the same time, you get really alarming ones, like like kill myself memes and like of like a teddy bear hanging itself, and you're like, what does this mean? Was this really because of calculus? I don't, I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like within our society, there's a lot of lack of empathy, and that we're all really desensitized to the idea of mental health and to the idea of depression, and so we all just take it as a norm and something that's an expectation for us to do. And I feel like one way that we can actually break down is to understand expectations and why we put so many on ourselves, and then try to tear those expectations away, because a lot of them just come from internal struggle, and then that we enforce with external usages like colleges and stuff like that. But I feel like once we break down those expectations, and also when we talk about having a support system, a lot of times people turn to social media and people turn to the internet because we're the internet generation. But there's no true connection through the internet, through social media. So you're not really getting support from those people that you see through a screen. You're just getting messages that don't really mean anything to you. So I feel like once we break down expectations, once we understand how we can better utilize social media to help support groups and to gain real life support groups, then we can actually better our mental health.
There was something that you touched on, and you, Amal, also touched on, that it's that there's a culture of this being normal. It's that we go to school and we hear our friends say, I want to die this morning, I've got a test. And all of us laugh, take a collective laugh, because we identify with that. We don't want to go take that test. Yeah. But it's the fact that they're using the term, I want to die, and to us, that's normal. So there's the cycle of when we hear people say things that to our parents would be really alarming, it goes in one ear and out the other. And so we have to, I think, break that chain first, is that we have to deconstruct the system of using, yes, it's funny, and yes, we understand what they mean, but it's when our friends actually mean it, we don't take it seriously, because our brains are not processing that as something serious, because it's never processed as something serious before. So I think if we break down that chain and stop the cycle where it's normal to us, then I think we can actually start making it a human issue, instead of it just being a cultural, okay, yeah, whatever, I want to go die, I don't want to get up this morning, something like that.
It's really interesting that the parents who are watching this program are probably saying to themselves, and especially grandparents, it's a whole different world.
Yes.
It's just
It
a
truly
whole different world. So Claire, best thing about your group?
Best thing about my group would have to be how personal it was. There were individuals in my group that had no problem shedding their vulnerability and saying, hey, I have this and this, but it's okay because I'm human. And instead of people looking at her or shaming her, it was a universal room of respect and unity. And instead of, we play the game of, well, you don't have it bad, why are you sad? Or you shouldn't be anxious, life is great. But instead it was the understanding that maybe being a teenager is hard, but eventually it'll be okay.
Wow. The depth of the discussion today is mind-blowing, but that's what the Sun Youth Forum is really all about. Lexi, you're up.
So my group was about America, and it involved a lot of things. If you imagined a collage of what America would be, we talked about it. It's guns, Trump, voting, social media, and just what it means to be an American. And I think that American perspective is what really hooked me onto that topic area, because it was actually the second year that I've gone within the same area. And it's always just when we talk about immigrants, why is it that we get to talk about it a certain way? Is it because we're from this country? Do we see it as a home invasion, or do we legitimately see it as someone who's being forcefully extruded out of their home or something like that? What was really cool is that there was a lot of different opinions. There was all sorts of kinds of people there, and I wish I knew his name. if it wasn't me, it would be him that was here right now, because he was actually such a fantastic person, and he's currently trying to go into the Navy. And he talked about how one of the topics was, should the president have a mandated service time? Like, should he be in the military or some sort of service before he becomes the president? And a lot of people were like, you know, you don't have to, like, serving your country, or some people were like, serving your country is mandatory. Like, if you're going to be the president and you're going to put in policy that could potentially endanger some people, you should be willing to rhetorically and literally die for your country. And him, coming from that experience, he talked about how, you know, that doesn't necessarily make sense. That, for the most part, it's a privilege to be in the service. And that those types of people have that certain type of character. But that doesn't necessarily mean that anyone who doesn't do that doesn't have the same sort of vigorous heart as they do. And I thought that was really pretty. And I cried to myself a little bit, but I didn't let anyone see it.
I do also think that's a little bit different for our generation, because you had mentioned that being in the military now is a privilege. I think, you know, a previous generation from now, it would have been totally different. It would have been, oh, it's something you have to do, or it's something that you can do. It's not a privilege. So that might be a way we can bridge the gap from one generation to another of what we see as the military and what we see as our country.
I also find it, in this country, you know, everybody in their head can say the word military and immediately you get that image. But if you go to places where there is mandatory service time, the image is very different. I feel like it's a lot calmer. It's a lot more routine to them than it is here. I feel that we almost hype it up in a way. We blow it up to be something different than what it probably truly means for someone to be in the service now than it was 20 or 40 years ago. And not every service member is going to go off and see combat nowadays. Many do, and you know, for their service, you know, I think most in this country are eternally grateful. But I think it's a very different concept, and so I think how America sees our military versus how other people with perhaps mandatory servitude sees their military, it's like taking your glasses on and off.
Mm-hmm. I think also, like, our generation is very different on this topic. I feel like especially younger people like to rebel, and they like to be more against that norm, and they don't really like to admit that they love their country, and they don't like to admit that they support different things that our country and our government is doing. They just like to see the issues and see the flaws, and I'm not saying that there aren't. I think that there are a ton of flaws, but just seeing the important parts of our country and these things that are very important. The military is extremely important, and our government and all of these things just are kind of necessary. And so in previous generations where that was seen as an obligation to go and serve your country, people were honored to do that. And now, younger generation, they more often don't like that idea. It's more of a debate. It's more of some people completely think that you should and you have to, and some people don't agree with it at all.
I definitely think it's within the spread of the news on Twitter especially. I think Twitter is it is one of the biggest tools that we could use at our age. It is the fastest way of information and what the biggest information is. And when we hear about certain things like PMCs committing international crimes, like overseas, when we hear about the certain kinds of ways that civilians in other countries are being mishandled by US soldiers, it scares a lot of us. And when we see the over-glamorification of national security, that's another thing that we find distaste in. And so, I don't know. I think to a certain degree, the somewhat complaining culture, I guess, of what it means to be online and what it means to see all of the abundance of problems that we have within our country that you talk about, I think that's fine. Because I would rather have that than no voices being heard at all. I don't remember which politician said it, but they were like, low voter turnout in a silent country means complacency within the government. And I think we're far from that, and that it's important to talk about these things.
So what was the best thing about your group as you look back on it?
I think You know, I'm such a big believer in freedom of speech for people who even have hot takes. You know, there were some people that were very anti-immigrant. There were some people that were very, I guess, like, if you were to affiliate it with a party, very conservative in nature, almost hyper-conservative. But it was such a safe space where they could speak their mind and not feel that they were going to be censored by someone telling them that what they're doing isn't okay, that you should be open-minded and be free-willing with all these people that you think aren't okay. And I found that really, really interesting. And I thought it was great that they could embrace the fact that they thought differently.
Elizabeth, you're on.
All right, so I had law and crime, and that covered everything from state to national policies. But the one I think we spent the most time on, we spent 45 minutes to an hour on this one topic out of 27 questions, was why is abortion more regulated than guns in America?
Say that again. Wow.
Why is abortion more regulated than guns in America? And that brought in everybody in the room. It encompassed everyone's opinion, because if you didn't have an opinion on abortion, you had an opinion on guns and vice versa. And it was just super, you know, we had a really amazing group where we could really, you know, build off of one another. And for the most part, we all looked to combine our opinions and find a compromising solution. But on this one, it was really hard to find that middle ground. So one of the things we discussed was the fact that in our Constitution, it explicitly gives us direction for gun ownership. You know, not as it applies today necessarily, because obviously weapons of war have changed in 200 years, but we find the backing for abortion through legal proceedings and interpretations of other amendments. And so that was really where it was a hard line to draw as to why people felt stronger on abortion than gun control, or why they thought it was more important.
The problem, I think, when we discuss abortion and gun control is that we have individuals on very extreme sides of the debate, right?
You think?
Yes. we have these extreme sides and perspectives about one single topic. And so when we ask ourselves, where's the common grounds, we can't find it. And I think that in regard to gun control specifically, my personal view has always been, I respect your constitutionality as long as the constitutionality respects morality. You know, and
You say that again.
okay,
That's pretty brilliant.
I respect your constitutionality if your constitutionality respects morality. And I understand that a long time ago, our founding fathers gave you the right to bear arms, and I respect that. However, it is a different time, and in today's day and age, guns are being abused, and we would be acting out of negligence and apathy if we didn't continue, or if we didn't do something about it, or continue to do nothing about it. And that's the hard truth.
Sorry. I definitely think that our country just has a lot of paranoia within it. And maybe that comes from being the apex country of the world, you know, of what it means to have one of the strongest militaries, one of the biggest and largest economies, a growing population in that sense. And so when we embrace the Second Amendment, and when certain people that are affiliated with certain political parties or just mindsets talk about how we don't put it out on the news about how many people are saved from the ownership of private guns rather than the amount of people that are killed from the ownership of private guns, I think that's an unfair stance to have, because I feel that in the information age, in the internet age that Amal had talked about, right, there's just a lot more security in that sense. And I don't think it's the wild, wild west anymore, personally. I don't think we're in a time where you're going to be fearful of a random person just busting into your home and trying to claim everything.
But what happens if it's not a home and it's a school? I think that's actually a more legitimate fear.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of where I was going with my argument, that we need stricter gun laws, not necessarily for those barging into homes, but for those barging into schools and killing our peers.
I agree, and there's like a paranoia where if you allow somebody to do something, you are like, you're gonna go do that. Like, I feel the mindset is, if I allow, or if someone allows more like stricter gun laws, then that means that you are consenting to like you have to personally agree. You can't, you have to stand on the soapbox and preach until everything goes your way, because you can't stand the idea of somebody else feeling unsafe in an area you feel safe in. It's like at schools, it's, all right, I understand that you want this in case of a home invasion, and I respect that. I understand it. I can only imagine how terrifying it would be to have someone attempting to break into your home and hurt you. But at the same time, I need to feel safe, and my peers, about 2,000 other students, need to feel safe in an area we go to. So it's people struggle to find that there's a difference, and that it's okay to make a difference, and it's okay to let somebody else, if you want to go 100 feet and somebody else wants to go a different direction, it's okay for both of you to come 5 feet. It's okay. You don't have to go all the way.
Yeah.
You can come because you're still further than you were. And that's something that really got brought up here, is that, it's okay to not, you don't have to personally partake for you to help somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, as you're saying, compromise, it doesn't have to be completely one way or completely the other way. Just finding that middle ground where not necessarily that everyone's happy, but that everyone can deal with it. Because there are all these people that either A, advocate very strongly for their gun rights, and they feel like they have that right because it's written in the Constitution. Or on the other hand, then it's these students that go to school, or these people that go to concerts or to movie theaters that just don't feel safe. So there needs to be some compromise, and maybe not everyone's going to be happy, but not everyone is happy right now, and people are unsafe and people are upset. And so finding a middle ground where at least something can budge, there has to be some, not necessarily that everyone's happy, but that it's not as bad as it is right now.
By show of hands, how many feel that you feel safe in your high school? Really?
I don't think necessarily that I feel safer at my high school than I do anywhere else, if that makes sense. So I think that that's kind of a interesting question that you asked, because it's not like I walk into a mall and feel any safer than I do at my high school.
Wow.
I would have to agree. It's not that I walk in and I feel unsafe, but it's I accept the risk as if I were at any other public place now. There's not necessarily a sense of like, all right, I'm here, I'm secure. It's just I'm here, and here are the risks.
Thank you, by the way, for this section. Isabella.
Okay, so my topic was school days, and we talked about a lot of things, but I think that the biggest thing that kind of envelops a lot of what we talked about was just youth influence in society. So we talked about mental health, and we talked about drug use, and we also just talked about different issues that different administrators are discussing about education and in schools, and just having student voice be important. So like we talked about, if writing teacher evaluations would be a good idea, and writing teacher reviews, and the logistics of doing that, as well as student influence in the society, such as advocating for trade schools over colleges, and just those kinds of topics. So my question for all of you, I guess, to kind of start this off, is how do you think that students can have a voice in our society?
Well, I think in the recent elections that we've seen is that we've had a large amount of youth voters going out and voting. I think a large part of that is social media. And before we were mentioning social media and saying, it might not be so great for some issues, but to get people out to have their voice, and things like Uber and Lyft offering free rides to voting stations is really important, to have people that don't have that opportunity otherwise to go out and vote, so everyone can have that voice.
I want to, for people who may have missed it at the beginning, this year at the Sun Youth Forum was the opportunity for students to register to vote. What a great thing.
Yeah, and I believe with influence, the thing is that there's two aspects of it. I think that it comes with power and platform. And I feel like a lot of youth don't have the power because power equals money, and we don't have money because we don't have jobs. But we do have platforms, as Ethan said, we do have social media. And I feel like if we utilize social media even better, and the way that we have been doing, because I think during the midterm elections, we had one of the 40% increase of youth. Is that what it was? Yeah, something like that. It was really impressive. But I feel like if we utilize social media to also showcase the issues that we have within our schools and within our surroundings, we're able to have more of a voice as to and more of a say on the matters that are going on in our area. Like for example, Malala, she had a blog before she was shot, and she was shot because of that blog. But because of that blog, she gained an audience that cared about the issues that she was talking about, and also herself. So when she was shot, that audience was outraged, right? And they cared so much about her issues and her as a person that she got even more media attention, and that her issues and her herself was given an even bigger platform, an even bigger audience. So then at some point she was on the UN platform. And that it just leads up to, maybe not that extreme because we are talking about school days, but at the same extent, we have this ability to have a voice and have these platforms, and it can make a difference, as we see in Malala and a bunch of other examples. And I feel like if we utilize them, even if we're not able to vote because even if we're not able to vote, I feel like if we utilize those things, we'll always be able to make a difference and make an influence on our society.
And sorry, you can go ahead.
Were any of you able to vote?
No.
I was able to vote in November. Me and a few of my other friends who, we have obviously late birthdays in the year. But it was so interesting to see that I had, for the first, so obviously most of us were freshmen during the 2016 elections. And that was a presidential election, and I can hardly remember anybody talking about it outside of, I think, the Young Democrats and Young Republicans Club. But this year, I had friends who were like, hey, so I might not have a ride to go vote. Do you think, because I drive, they're like, do you think I could go with you, or you could help me? And they were actively seeking ways to go, and our teachers they explained what was up for the vote. And I think if we I think part of low voter turnout, especially amongst the youth, is that we're not sure what's up. We don't understand that if we vote on, question 1 or, whatever the question may be, that it's going to impact A, B, and C. And I think when you sit and explain it, and when you find community support for it, so it's like, yeah, I'm going to go vote and I can take you with me. Or, hey, my voting place is over here and yours is over here. However, I can drop you off and come pick you back. When we make it accessible and when we make it together, I got emails from one of my favorite makeup brands saying, hey, today's the day to vote. Click here to find your polling place. Nothing to do with anything they were selling, but just general, the nation coming out and supporting each other. So I think if we make it more accessible to people of our age, it's going to get easier, and we will have more of a voice because people will understand that they have a voice.
I think also, kind of what you were talking about, how Malala had this huge platform and she was standing up and she was advocating for what she believed in. And I don't think that necessarily us as teens, not everyone is that person that is going to go out and rally, and they're not going to go to protests or do things like that. But things like voting and things like doing internships at different jobs and just getting experience in the world and educating yourself on these topics, I think that that's where more people can have a voice. So not necessarily that you're going and screaming out on rooftops, but that you are being heard and that you have an opinion and you're educating yourself and that your opinion matters, even as a youth. Yeah.
Right. What you were touching on, I wanted to ask, other than voting, what is the most prominent way youth can engage in our government?
Oh, we had law and crime, and that was one of, and the answer we came up with, and it's in my notes somewhere here, is showing support through businesses.
Okay.
And I found that that was what we came up with. It was, if we all, as a collective, all decided to, like, as a nation, all the millions of people, if we all just decided to stop shopping at Walmart, it would go out of business and they would have nothing to do because they would have no customers, because we all collectively decided that this wasn't something we were going to participate in. If as a youth, if we can get a majority of people to collectively either support something, support a business that has good morals and good ethics, and support businesses like them that they pay their workers a fair wage, they don't take away holiday hours, they don't have unfair work practices, the system of allowing those businesses with unfair work practices will die out because they will not have any customers to fund them. And I applied the same principle to politicians, to policy, is if you can find a support group and rally that group and convince and educate people on what is fair and what's not, you can stop things because you take away what they need to function.
Isabella, final comment. Best thing about the Sun Youth Forum?
For me, I really loved a lot about it. I thought it was a great experience. But just kind of about this topic that we were talking about, we got a voice at this Sun Youth Forum, and politicians were there and they listened to us. In my room, I had a school superintendent or someone high up, and he was writing down notes of what we were saying so that he could take it back and that he could apply what we were saying. So us as young people, we were being respected for what we had to say. They respected that we had opinions that were valid, and he wanted to take those and use those. And he realized, and a lot of these people that put on this forum realized, that young people are intelligent people and that they have opinions, and that their opinions are smart, and that they have insight to things that the older generation might not see.
Well, this program, more than anything, helps to explain what the Sun Youth Forum is really all about. And you are extraordinary group of people. And so very, very grateful to have you as panelists. And hopefully for the people who are watching this program and will see it again and again and again. And something that I always forget every year, that I don't want to forget, thank you to UNLV and to UNLV Television, because it's what a great job UNLV always does, and it's very exciting. It's absolutely very, very exciting. Any final thoughts as we're coming to an end?
I just wanted to thank UNLV and then other panelists, because as we mentioned, as students, we are not given the platform. We keep talking of a platform, but it's seldom that we come to the conclusion that there are opportunities that we can take. And I think that this opportunity is one that we are all very grateful for. So thank you.
Are you any different because of the Sun Youth Forum?
I think that, in simple terms, yes, because it offered me different perspectives in a professional environment. Because through social media, we have encounterments of different opinions. Yeah. But I think people tend to forget the professionalism that has to come with debate. Because debate isn't fighting, it's proper communication.
I think a lot more schools and a lot more teachers within Las Vegas should go to the Sun Youth Forum. Because there are some schools there that only brought like a couple kids. And even if, let's say, that like most of them aren't people like us, per se. Like I know these two from debate. Like they're also within speech and debate, and so they're already within that culture. I think kids that are even just ones that sit in the back of the classroom should be exposed to that kind of environment and should be exposed with what they think as hard questions and actually be down to answer them.
I think on that, I just think that we should increase just the normalization of things like this. So not necessarily bring every student to the Sun Youth Forum, but just in schools, advocate for educating students on these topics and seeing what's really going on around us and outside of the school and outside of our own personal lives, what's happening in the world around us and in our city and in our schools, and just educating ourselves and learning about those things and understanding other perspectives and seeing that and having that culture in our schools and for our students.
Stop teaching that you can't talk about politics. That's huge. It's one of the jokes is like, well, there's two things you don't talk about, politics and religion, and I think we need to stop saying that to people.
Well, I think there's one thing that you can't teach, and that's to care. And I feel like if we have these types of environments, then people start to care. They start to see the exigency within these policies, within these big questions. I feel like by talking about them, they realize there's connections to their everyday lives. And by doing that, people start to care and people start to want to educate themselves and they want to start to get involved. And I feel like by doing that, by caring, then I think we'll get there.
We also talked about empathy earlier, and something like the Sun Youth Forum is a great way to practice empathy and to listen to other people, because empathy isn't something you have to learn, it's something you practice. And having this kind of setting in schools and even smaller groups is a great way to build that empathy in our future generation.
I've been doing this for like about a dozen years, and you guys are just amazing. I should say you girls and guy. It's so exciting. And we're in good hands. If you are the future, we are in good hands. And I think people need to understand there's only one Sun Youth Forum in the whole world. Certainly there's only one Sun Youth Forum in the United States of America. And what a legacy. So thank you to Hank and to all the people who have followed him, and thank you to the Las Vegas Sun. What a great, great paper, and what an important paper. Till next year, everybody, this is the Sun Youth Forum.